Sanchez Jr. is absent. Let's go ahead and all stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Hosso.
I'm sorry, I have to go twice around.
We were talking about that
I just got out of my office and I come and say, hey, I can
There's only one way to get in,
Yes, and I thought, okay, the other, oh.
and I passed it, so I had to.
Well, I didn't back up with the vehicle behind me. Otherwise, I would have done that.
But I
But,
came on the dirt road,
oh,
And then
On
you
the
just
side
wait
of
for the GPS.
and then the GPS is right in front of me. It's like, God.
So item number 4 on the agenda is the swearing in of commission members. Everybody present has been sworn in. All that have not been are absent at the moment. And then item number 5 is discussion and possible action on the designation of alternative commission members. We heard from Steve Pinion last week that that wasn't a necessity, and thus far, all but one present, or actually I think all of us currently present. All but one present have been here at every single meeting and have all been sworn in. So I don't think that we need to really list anybody else as alternatives. So we're just going to do without having alternatives from this point. I think we need to vote on that, or you good with that? I think we can just.
We don't.
Okay, no, perfect. We're just going to go ahead and get rid of the alternates altogether for here on. Item number 6 is the approval of minutes for the meeting held on Thursday, February 1st, 2024. I seek a motion to approve.
I move the minutes be approved as they're presented.
Second.
All right. Motion to approve by E.T. Page and seconded by Noe. All right. And then item number 7.
All in favor?
Oh, yes, correct. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Onward to item number 7, get to work here, which is the workshop meeting. This is the chapter commission will conduct a workshop meeting to discuss and work on the proposed home rule charter for the city of Petula. The charter commission will accept public input and provide an opportunity for citizens attending the meeting to be heard. Okay, so the homework that we've had for the last month, haven't been able to get to is I've asked everybody to at least read the first 10 pages, write any notes down, talk to people in your area and in your circles and see if any concerns. Has everybody been able to do that? Cool. All right. Anybody have any questions or comments on any of those first 10 pages? So the first 10 pages outline and set into rule. In Article 1, we have the forms of government and boundaries. Now, that basically sets up what the form of government we are going to operate under as, sets that up, sets our boundaries, the extensions, and contraction boundaries as well. So what it talks about on page 1 is our current boundaries. It says our current boundaries are what currently exists in Petula today, and over the extensions, which is smallest capitalization, maximum of annual per year, and it also explains the limits. That we see here. in item number one, section 1.03, the city of Missoula shall have the power by ordinance to fix the boundary limits of the city of Missoula and provide for the alteration and extension of said boundary limits and the annexation of additional territory lying adjacent to the city with or without the consent of the territory and inhabitants annexed. Subject to such procedural rules as may be prescribed in the rules of the chapter or charter. So there, basically, it's very, very broad language. Right? It's basically saying, hey, against the boundary of the Tua, right? Like we can annex up to like, right against the boundary. We can't go 5 miles down the road past the boundary. We can't go 10 miles down the road past the boundary. We can go to our teacher falls and just annex a random piece of property. And even then, Steve kind of laid it for us last week. That is, you can't really pull that off anyways. Almost all annexation must be voluntary. I think that's been most of the biggest concerns for a lot of citizens in Petula have been the annexation. And this doesn't give us any kind of power to enact anything that we wouldn't otherwise normally be able to do anyways.
Jacob, we skipped over, but if you look at the very first sentence there, section 1.03, the last word of that sentence says, by methods herein set forth and consistent with Texas state law.
Correct.
That is the reason we cannot just arbitrarily start annexing.
That's correct.
It's very restrictive on the state level.
That's correct. So as far as language and everything in Article 1, I haven't seen anything in that article on the first and second page that needs to be changed. It's fairly vague and broad, but it doesn't give any. Basically, there's no reason for anybody to be worried more than they would be in today's environment anyways. This doesn't change anything existing currently. So I don't see a reason in changing anything there. Is everybody in agreement on that?
Did we make for because I guess I'm questioning the fact that I don't think we ever made it public to the people out there that they had the choice of either accepting the annexation, like the ranchers, for example, and I think when I heard Steve, that kind of took me by surprise when he said they have the choice of either accepting or rejecting the annexation.
Correct. So, as I said, almost all annexation that exists is going to be voluntary annexation, meaning that the city will reach out to a landowner right outside and say, hey, we want to annex this land. When that happens, basically they would get city tax, but they get all of the city benefits, right? So the city would be, at that point, they would have to put out water, sewage, all that stuff, right? And exactly, somebody can say, no, I don't want that. They want to keep their land private. And then the city doesn't really have a leg to stand on at that point. Now, in the case of eminent domain, which is not the same as annexation just means that you are within city limits. Eminent domain is to take property for a specific purpose to turn it into something. So those are the differences there. If somebody doesn't want their property to become city property, there's nothing really that the city can do other than go out and purchase the property at that point. The city could purchase the property and then annex it, but no, there's no way of somebody taking that. That's not voluntary.
And I think that's the reason why a lot of people were kind of negative about the changes that were being made, and they automatically assumed that they were going to be
Annexing land all the way around, right? Well, and two, it actually goes on to say about, is that an eminent domain or is that I want to say it's an annexation.
I think
Maximum amount per year. Sorry.
we need to be a little more clear, I think, when we're talking about eminent domain. You use the word, the city could take land. It is not that way at all.
Right.
Eminent domain, the city could buy land.
Right.
And it's really price. It's not.
Fair. You're right. And that's correct. And nobody take land legally at all. But they could buy it for public use. So here in section 1.03, subsection 3, talks about the maximum amount of annexation per year, right? So everybody, might have been worried that, hey, they're going to start annexing all of us and they're going to turn us all into, Cotulla City. Again, you just become part of the city at that point. But it outlines here that the maximum amount in any calendar year, the city may not annex the total area greater than 10% of the total incorporated area of the city on January 1st of that year. So what that means is the entire size of Cotulla, the entire area size of Cotulla. We are only allowed to annex up to 10% of that in an entire year.
With an exception.
I'm sorry?
Another exception to that. Look at the last sentence of that paragraph. That does not include voluntary
Right.
annexation.
Right.
So if a subdivision wanted to be annexed and asked for it, then that doesn't restrict it to 10%.
Right. And at that point, it would be important to clarify. So in this document, voluntary annexation is where a landowner or an entity comes out and says, hey, we want to. Okay, that's voluntary annexation. And then regular old annexation is where the city approaches somebody and says, hey, we would like to annex this. At which point they could either say, great, or they can, fight it and say, no, we don't want to do that.
An example of voluntary annexation recently would be the business park out on the south side of the river where the new truck stop is.
Yeah.
That they asked to become part of the city.
That way
To
they
get city services,
got water and
sewer.
and garbage. So
What would be the range, I guess the ranches or the ranchers benefit to want to be annexed?
well, one example could be, so say,
And we talk about water utilities and whatnot, but other than
well, say a landowner wanted to increase their revenue. They wanted to open up a what's it called? A housing project, subdivision. Okay, on part of their. So they decided to block off a certain part of their land, and they say, I want to build a bunch of houses here. Well, they can separate that out, and they can come to the city and say, hey, this pasture, this property, I want to make this specific property. I want to annex this so that way I can, build houses and stuff like that here. Now, they don't have to. You don't have to do that. But you could, because then you get city waters and sewage and everything else. If they didn't, if they tried to build a subdivision without it, then they would be responsible for the water and
they have
sewage.
to,
And
well,
permits. Right. And so it becomes a bit more cumbersome at that point. So that would be one example of someone might do it. Another reason is if, say, a rancher decided they wanted to open up some kind of country club or something like that. They wanted to be part of the city for to kind of, again, reduce on maybe some expenses that come with having a lot of water and a lot of electrical uses and garbage on one's property. Because they're, anytime that somebody does anything like that, you're responsible for making sure that the water's clean and drinkable You have to pass testing X amount, X amount of times, weekly or monthly. There's a lot of things that go into that.
It's a registered water system. It has to be certified.
Right.
If you're not on the city's water supply.
Mm.
It's a lot.
There's a lot of regulations involved in that. So,
Also, the farmers and ranchers don't need to have their entire ranch annexed. It's just the small portion
Okay.
that they want to use for a project.
Hmm.
Which would typically be along the road right for new business.
and the best places for that would be in, thick brush areas that aren't used for anything anyway. Right? Like, instead of going
Right.
to Graceland or something like that. You either don't have any questions.
And I think the reason I asked those is because later on, we're going to be asking us those questions.
Right.
And I'd like to have some kind of response.
Well, the proper response.
And I think on the first time, that's what the people had the impression, oh, now they can come and take my land.
Well, I can promise you that was that absolutely was exactly that in my circle, and but then I've done my own research since then, and I understand a little bit better how that actually works. And again, annexation is one thing, but if basically the city is not just going to try to annex something just for the sake of having it, right? There has to be some kind of project in there, and that's whenever it kind of turns over into eminent domain. We move over to eminent domain. Section 2.02, the city shall have full authority and right to exercise eminent domain when necessary or desirable to carry out any of the powers conferred upon it by this chapter or by the Constitution of the laws of the state of Texas. The city may only exercise the power of eminent domain in the manner authorized or permitted by the Constitution of the laws of the state. The authority of eminent domain shall include the ability of the city to take and fee in land so condemned for such authority shall include the right to condemn public property for clearly defined public purpose. Now, that language does sound very threatening to some people. So we could even maybe change this language up to be a bit more clear. But again, that is all it covers, at least in the first 10 pages that we've read so far, on eminent domain. It just says that within the rights that this chapter gives, or charter gives, and then the Constitution of the state of Texas. Nothing, again, that we ever put in this charter will ever go above the Constitution of the state of Texas. There is no entity, public or commercial, I suppose. There's no private organization or city or any kind of municipality that can do anything outside of the state of Texas's own constitution. Page 3.
Section 202.
202.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So, and it's kind of like Mr. Pena went down on the rabbit hole there about what exactly eminent domain is, and it's a never-changing thing, and it is. But it also, puts in this charter for clearly defined public purpose. Now, what is a public purpose? Well, public purpose is not a golf course. It is not a country club. It is water wells or water towers, maybe. Which point it would be a very little area that was taken. And to clarify, sold. Eminent domain, if the landowner decides that they don't want to just sign and sell immediately, that's whenever eminent domain is taken. The steps of eminent domain usually mean the process in which it usually goes is an entity will decide, we have this project and we want to put it here. And they pick the best spot for that project. They put it down in that, the property. Great.
But
So we have to acquire this property. We have to come up with all these different things what this property can be used for. And then they're responsible for approaching the landowner first and showing them a letter of intent and an offer for that property beforehand. Go
I'd
ahead.
like to add something to this. Something that I learned from going through eminent domain at the airport for an airport project to lengthen the runway. This is not a bad process for the landowner. As a matter of fact, it was to the landowner's advantage for the city to send a letter saying it was going to be annexed or taken by eminent domain, because it gave the landowner the tax advantage of not having to declare it as a large scale increase in value when they sold it compared to when they bought it. They were allowed to defer that until later by the IRS if it looked like the city was going to take it. So the city never annexed a single thing out there in those two different projects, even though we've purchased land twice. But we had to send a letter, and the city voted on it to tell the landowner we were going to annex it, to buy it by eminent domain. And the landowner wanted the city to do that just so that they would have that piece of paper for the IRS, and it saved the landowner a lot of money. So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's not. It's just it's another tool for purchasing property for projects, and it could be beneficial to both landowner and the municipality or entity doing the purchasing. Because you're exactly right. If one just comes out and says, "Hey, I'll be more than happy to sell you this," well, now the value of that land has gone up because you have somebody interested in the party that's about to get annexed. It's about to, right? It becomes a real big project, and so they almost kind of immediately become responsible for that difference. Eminent domain, is from a lot of the experiences in the education I've been reading up on this on. It's almost more of a tool, honestly, for the landowner than anything. There's a little bit of a court process involved sometimes if they really don't want it, but they have negotiation power. Almost always the land is almost always going to be sold, but the landowner could drag it on and could make more money on it depending on their legal team. So it's not a dirty bad thing. As well as the city of Cotulla already has the powers from the state's constitution, because it's already a municipality. So anytime that the constitution of the state of Texas changes around eminent domain, the city of Cotulla is automatically, their powers are updated with that. This charter just puts it in writing that we have the power to use it, as one does.
This charter technically does not change a single thing pertaining to eminent domain.
Or annexation for that matter. Maybe on the 10%, I don't know. Actually didn't look up the law on the annexation, but I don't think it really changes anything at all about the annexation either.
how common is it that they'll condemn a public property?
Well, condemnation is something a little bit different. Condemnation and the purpose of eminent domain, you're talking like building or something here in town.
Right.
So from my understanding, and I might be completely wrong on this, and I'm sure David and Mr. Penny are going to yell at me, but from my understanding on that, it's not, well, this Cotulla, it's not common at all, obviously. You got plenty of buildings that could use some of that, but they're that kind of gets answered a little bit when we get to the coding, to the how. I'm trying to think of the terminology for what is it?
Coding are you talking about?
The coding for the. Oh, I just drew a blank on it.
Well, they do actually condemn land
Right.
to annex it or eminent domain.
Eminent domain it. So basically, yes, if a building is ragged and it's a public health issue, if they can show that it's a public health issue, and then they can come up with a project to put it up on, to put in that
Well,
area.
that's what I was saying, but there's a stipulation that says for a clearly defined purpose or defined public purpose, right? So that means they have to have
So
some intentions to build or to do something
when
with
it
that
when
property.
it when it comes to, so yes, but and on that, one could probably go about, okay, well, this building is a public health problem.
That's not how they, no, that's not the condemnation we're talking about. You don't have to have a building falling down to get condemned.
Okay. Well,
This-
taxes.
When the city is going through the process of eminent domain, this city would decide that the project has to go there. It might be a brand new structure on that property, but that's the only piece of property that a well could be drilled, for example. Then it would get condemned even though the building is there. And it may have to get torn down, but it's not because it's in bad shape. It's because that piece of land has to be used for a certain project. And no other site would work. Whatever the,
So for the public use, that would, in that scenario, that would be, water for public use and for public purposes. My mind was going to say an older building that needed to be condemned because of code issues, or even tax, back taxes or something like that. A property very well could be in that, with or without this charter, could be condemned for a health health
that would have
violations.
nothing to do with purchasing the land or taking it. That would be just to get rid of an unsafe structure.
Right, but that would be the public use in that scenario. Move on to, let's actually take a step back. I skipped a little bit ahead. Let's take a step back. Still on page 3, section 2.01, local self-government. The city shall have all the power granted to cities by the Constitution and laws of the state of Texas, together with all the implied powers necessary to carry into execution such granted powers as fully and completely as though they were specifically enumerated in this charter, and those express and implied powers necessary for government interests, health, welfare, and good order of the city and its inhabitants. All that's saying is that we have all the city would have the power for self-governments for the benefit of everybody in the city. Whether expressed or implied in the Texas State Constitution, there's nothing really of any. It's just saying, hey, we have the right to govern ourselves as a city. Anybody have anything for that? Okay, we can move on to section 2.03, intergovernmental relations. The city may exercise any of its power or perform any of its functions and may participate in the financing thereof jointly or in cooperation by contract or otherwise with any one or more states or any state civil division or agency, or the United States or any of its agencies, and any other country in
County.
county, sorry. I saw that, I'm going, no,
Work with
no,
other
not that.
countries.
In any other county or any other political subdivision in the state of Texas. That just means that we can cooperate with other cities and states within, and counties
Pretty
within.
self-explanatory.
Right. Composition, selection, and term. This is section 3.01 on Article 3, City Council. Now, here's where we start getting into kind of the more important stuff. You know, being with City Council, some people are concerned, as we heard, that City Council may have too much power, and they are concerned that this gives them more power. As we read through this, we're going to find that this is common practice in our current City Council. This is the type A, if I'm not mistaken, type of form of government that we went over last week, which is a weak mayor. We'll get to all that here. Composition, selection, and term. The City Council shall be composed of a mayor and 5 council members. And the council members shall be elected at large for purposes of council seat identification. The 5 positions shall be designated as place 1 through 5, place 1 and 2, and the mayor shall be elected in even number years, and place 3, 4, and 5 shall be elected in odd number years, thus providing for staggered terms, unless sooner removed under provisions of this charter. All council members shall serve for a term of 2 years and until their successor has been elected and duly qualified. That's our current term election. It's 2 years. That's the way it currently works right now. So this changes.
Yeah, no changes.
No changes there to our current city council, you know, the selection and term. Qualification of city council. Candidates of city council must be a qualified voter at the time of filing, having no felony convictions or any offense involving moral turpitude. For the purposes of this section, any final conviction, plea of guilty, or of no contest, including those involving the suspension and deferral of punishment, pretrial diversion, deferred adjudication. Basically, if you get in trouble in court, you go to court and you take any kind of plea deal or you know, anything in that nature where probation involving community supervision shall be considered a final conviction herein. Meaning if you get in trouble and you're in some form or fashion, not necessarily found guilty, but it's you got in trouble, you got caught, you're on a list somewhere now, you no longer qualify to be city council. Obviously, that's pretty wise to protect us from convicts and criminals from joining on city council. But
it's strange because a deferred adjudication at the end of your probation, your record is cleared. So that's kind of
actually, and then on that, involving community supervision shall be final conviction herein. I think it was for the purpose of yeah. So if you're still on deferred adjudication, yes, your record might be cleared, and at that point maybe nobody sees it within city council. What I was checking was if there was a kind of a time lapse in there for how long that holds up, but it seems to be that this is forever. Now, if there's no record at that point, I suppose that bit right there would be void and null. Waiting on Noe. He's looking for something here.
I've got just a point of change here. The very first sentence on section 3.02. It should be a candidate for city council must be a qualified voter, not candidates plural. You have to get that changed.
Okay.
Have we asked Steve to kind of look at the definition of moral turpitude, or to kind of elaborate a little more?
We
on
discussed it, but I don't remember what the answer was.
Yeah, the guys had gone, I think we went round and round and we discussed it and whatnot. And I thought that Steve was going to elaborate more on what moral turpitude meant. Or just,
Well, let's get him to do that for our next meeting.
Okay.
I wrote another thing down I want him to
Clarify.
clarify for us. We'll have some things to talk about next time.
do y'all know what moral turpitude is? I really don't know how to define moral turpitude unless he, if he elaborates more on that, maybe a little more detail, maybe.
Maybe just change
Yeah.
the language entirely a little bit there to be more clearly defined as to what exactly moral
I know what it's trying to mean. I
Right.
just don't know exactly, what it entails.
Right.
I think that it's a term, though, that's already in use with the existing
Yeah.
requirements.
You're probably right.
But yeah, let's get an answer to it, since nobody here knows what it means.
It goes on to say that in the sentence afterwards, candidates must be. So I suppose we might change that to where it says candidates to a candidate.
Well, that one was correct on that
Okay.
because it was a plural in the verb.
Okay. Candidates must be at least 21 years of age at the time of election for which they are filing. They must be a current resident of the city of Cotulla and must yes, okay, that's right. And must have been a resident of the city of Cotulla or recently annexed territory, we'll touch on that, for at least 12 months prior to the filing date and shall not be indebted to the city of Cotulla. So a little bit of the
That means taxes, right?
yes, taxes or water
Or
bill,
fines or
stuff like that,
whatever.
fines, right. Yeah, if we're backed up on water bill, electric, well, not electric bill, but sewage, garbage, any utility bill or taxes, if any way that they're indebted to the city, as well as even using any other city. I know that sometimes, or at least in the past, sometimes a city would go and help clean up around a property or something like that, and they would charge them X amount of dollars to do that. Any services at all that the city provides, that must be paid up in full at that point.
May I give you
Absolutely.
Merriam-Webster's definition of moral turpitude?
Yeah, let's hear it.
And all these computers do something else. One is an act or behavior that gravely violates the sentiment or accepted standard of the community. 2, a quality of dishonesty or other immorality that is determined by a court to be present in the commission of a criminal offense or a crime involving moral turpitude. That is all it has for the definition. That makes sense?
It's a bit vague.
It is vague.
It's a bit vague to be in the document. I might, especially when it says in that first description, what was the
Gravely.
Violates the sentiment or accepted standard.
accepted standard of the community?
What is that?
Right. So how does one define the accepted standard of the community, especially in a charter and especially with
We
times
all
changing?
have different standards.
Right. Right.
Number
So-
2, though, even it does say how it's determined. It's determined by a court. So even that is nebulous. Whatever one court decides versus another court.
Who has ever been charged with moral turpitude?
Well, that's a good question for research at home, I suppose. Very interested to see how that would go.
I believe the act, when you apply to, when you sign up for a council or mayor, it asks, very simple, have you ever been convicted of a felony? So it's really up to the person applying to put yes or no, because we're not allowed as city secretary to say, well, I know he has, and he didn't, but somebody else has to report it to the Secretary of State, they'll be referred to the Attorney General, and that's how it has to happen. We legally cannot say, no, can't do it, because I know you got arrested,
Mhm.
you know, unless we have record of it, which we wouldn't because we're not a police department, so.
That doesn't prevent somebody else from bringing it up though.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what she's
Yeah,
saying is that,
It has to come,
It's not,
the complaint
else.
has to come from somebody.
I got you.
So in the middle of their term, if someone, who's responsible for bringing it up?
Any, anybody that's not the city of Catoosa.
or even in the race, beforehand.
Mhm.
But
Just
I'm
after
saying that
filing.
they don't find out like right now before, during the race.
Yeah.
But right in the middle of the term, they find out that this individual had a criminal record.
They would, so
who
you would,
would be responsible for.
so whoever found that out would likely file a complaint or, make that public knowledge. And then at which point, I don't actually, haven't read far enough to see what the recall terms are, but that city councilor would probably,
Individual would probably have an issue with the attorney general.
Yeah.
Or
which
district
point-
attorney or something like that with having filed a false statement on an official public
Yeah.
forum.
It has to be reported to the Secretary of State. Secretary of State will then advise you on what steps have to go. So if it gets to the point where Attorney General gets involved, then that's fine. We get involved.
It's, that's a serious thing.
I don't think I've worked for the city for about 13 years and today it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
let's hope we keep
I've never heard of it happening either,
I've never.
here or anywhere else.
So back to this other piece right here. So they must be a current resident of the city and must have been a resident of the city or a recently annexed territory. Now that kind of goes back to the annexation. So like earlier we talked about, what if a ranch decides that it wants to annex part of the ranch? Well, if the person was living on that property, but not on the specifically annexed property, then they would not have been living within the recently annexed property for 12 months prior. So there's a little clarification there in case you might have been wondering about that. So other than that, that's pretty well cut and dry. Anything there? Okay. All candidates for city council and any entity owned, controlled by, or operated by them shall be current on all obligations to the city, including payment of ad valorem taxes, hotel occupancy taxes, municipal court fines, utility bills, and or any other debt of any type owed to the city. So this kind of answered that question a little bit earlier as to what being paid up with the city entails. Candidates who are current at the time of the filing for office on a city-approved payment plan for a debt owed to the city shall not be considered indebted for the purposes of this section. Now, what's that mean? That means that if I have, say I have back taxes or back ad valorem taxes or some kind of tax. If I'm on a current payment plan and I'm up to date on those payment plans, I shall not be considered indebted. So it kind of turns it into and at that point, anybody that has indebted and not paying, it's basically a delinquency debt that they are disqualified from being a,
Candidate.
right, a candidate at the time. And it makes it very specific there too. Candidates who are current at the time of filing for the office. So I can't go file for office and then turn around and go get on a payment plan. I have to be on a payment plan beforehand. Candidates shall continuously maintain their primary residence within the city for the term of office. Pretty basic. No member of the city council of the city of Catoosa shall hold, apply for, or seek any paid position under the city government during their term of office. Now, we might change a little bit of the terminology there, a little bit of the words there, just because in the very next section we go into compensation, and we were going to go ahead and start trying to give them, the city councilmen and women, $200 per meeting, as well as the mayor for $300 per meeting. We'll get a little bit more into that here in a minute, but we might, technically that would become a paid position for city councilor. What do you?
I think it's how you categorize it. I would think it would be more like a stipend than it would be a salary or
Right.
be a paid individual.
All right.
$200 a month is $2,400 a year.
Right. No, I'm not saying it's you're right, but I'm saying, but for the purposes, I mean, they are still getting in some way paid. So we might just change the terminology a little bit there. I'm just saying the vocabulary might need to be in some form of fashion change. Maybe any paid position under the city government other than city councilor, mayor during their term. You could very well just add that in there, and it fixes that little bit of mix up. In my opinion, maybe I'm wrong.
No, that's good.
Okay.
Get Steve to come up with some
Yeah.
language to clarify that. Does y'all have any comments or questions on whether councilmen should receive $200 a meeting? Our thoughts at the time were that these men and women give a lot of their time. And right now it's all 100% volunteer, but we felt they ought to be compensated something for the time they spend managing the city's
Budgets.
large budget. You know, that's like a multi-million-dollar corporation and their board of directors. We just wanted anybody to be able to apply for the job and not have it hurt them financially, regardless of their financial background, whether they were wealthy or not.
Now, it goes on to say that that reimbursement, or rather, they shall be paid per regular or special called meeting that they attend in its entirety, and shall be eligible for reimbursement of actual expenses incurred for required training, approved conferences, and official travel. Now, specifically, that currently, I don't know if they get paid. I haven't read that part of the current charter. I don't know if they get paid back if they have to drive out to Austin or go to some kind of training. I don't know if they
They
get.
should.
They do?
The
Yeah.
city covers it fully.
Okay. Okay.
So the only change is gonna be.
So the only change is gonna be what they're
Them
doing.
getting it for.
The extra $200, which I mean, that seems pretty fair, at least for that one specific meeting.
Those meetings can sometimes last many hours,
Yes.
and there's usually a lot of work involved outside of the meeting hours. And a lot of them have to come in between meetings to deal with city business. They need somebody to sign a check or do something, and they're the only ones around.
I think the hardest part of their job is having to be held accountable for everything that goes on in the operation of the
Right.
city itself. You know, it's hard when people are just kind of, they approach you and always ask you questions about what's going on in the city,
Right.
or
When
they're
you're-
upset at you, and then they start, taking it out on you because you are a city councilman.
Well, and if you own a business, it could affect your
Yeah.
business negatively,
Yeah.
your policies or anything you vote on. So this is kind of this is a nod in the right direction personally. And I'm not going to push that we put this in, but personally, I would actually love to see that city councilors do get paid at fair salary. You look at Hondo and Uvalde even. You look, I don't know for sure about Uvalde actually, but you look at a lot of other city councils, especially here in Texas, that are on a city that's going in the right direction, right? That has good business, that is making good policies for their inhabitants. A lot of them have actual salaries. City councilor is their job. It's their job to benefit the city, and it reflects. You can see it. They have better businesses in their town. I would love to see us one day actually revisit this and put in that, because the purpose of that is that makes it more attractable for people that are better qualified for that position to actually come. They're actually seeing that they're getting something for their time. It's not just free. They have to come and start a whole life, start a whole business here in town, have some kind of other income that's not doing this thing, and they can prioritize this being 24/7. So I would like to see eventually that we get to that point. I can understand that currently why we're not, but I think eventually I would like to see that.
It's very similar to commissioners
Mm-hmm.
are paid,
Mhm.
but it's essentially the same thing. It's just governance on a county level,
Right.
a bigger budget.
So,
This could be changed if the voters wanted to change it at some future date.
right.
Because everything in here can be changed by a vote to the general public. We'll get to that later.
So, I suppose we can go ahead and move on. Actually, to section 3.04, we're still on page 4 for the mayor. This outlines exactly what the mayor's position is in the city. So the mayor shall be elected at large in even number years, and unless sooner removed under provisions of this charter, and shall serve for a term of 2 years and until a successor has been elected and duly qualified. The mayor shall preside at meetings of the city council and shall cast his vote only, very specific, only in the event of a tie on matters before the council. The mayor shall be recognized as head of the city government and shall exercise all other duties prescribed for a type A form of government unless otherwise specified within this charter. This kind of that language right there kind of goes into, this is a home rule charter, meaning that we're a type A government with some spice, with a little bit of extra something different than what a typical type A government would be. This also means that the type A government that we're going for is a weak mayor government, meaning that the only time that a mayor has a vote is when it's in a tie. Other than that, that's not his job. His job, or her job, the mayor's job, is to serve as the city's budget officer who with the assistance of the city manager, shall submit the annual municipal budget to the city council in the manner prescribed by the law. B, shall sign all ordinances, actually doesn't say shall, it just says sign all ordinances, proclamation, resolutions, and other official city documents as may be approved by the city council. Appoint, with the advice and consent of the council, the members of any citizen advisory boards and commissions whose conditions of membership shall have been previously set by ordinance. Serve as official head of the city for purposes of military law, national or regional disasters, or when so declared by the President of the United States or by the Governor of the state of Texas. We'll come back and touch on that a little bit. In time of local emergency, oversee and coordinate with the police and other health and safety providers to maintain order, enforce all laws, and provide for the general welfare of the city. Perform other duties as authorized by the city by ordinance or resolution of the general law. And we're going to stop there real quick. So serve as we're going to come back to D. Serve as official head of the city for purposes of military law, national or regional disaster, or when so declared by the President of the United States or the Governor of the state of Texas. What that means is that in that scenario, the mayor shall become the official head of the city. that person is now the executive head in charge, and not in from the language that I'm seeing, and not in a weak mayor sense. It means that basically what the mayor says as far as city ordinances goes. It won't be up for vote for city council, if I'm correct from how I
I
read
think that's the
this.
same way it is now.
Yeah, it is.
Now I can see that being a pretty fair thing.
That's emergency.
That's an emergency situation. We have big problems if we ever get to that point. The mayor being the head of the city, I think that's a pretty good thing. Whenever we have an emergency, we want to have a clear, direct leadership. We don't want to have to be discussing everything and voting everything. This is where we're going to go. This is how we're going to, go about helping our citizens.
Can you imagine the burden and the responsibility, the major responsibility that this guy is carrying?
Right.
And then for us to toll and to kind of get upset over the fact that he gets $300
Yeah.
a meeting. Can you imagine that? It's just, it baffles me to think that we would disagree for him to get any kind of compensation or a stipend.
Right. So pretty big position, the mayor. This doesn't change, as ET said, doesn't seem that it changes any of the current, we're pretty sure that that's the current statutes for the charter. I'll probably see if I can't double check that, but that I don't see any changes that need to be made there. We move on to section 3. The mayor shall be paid $300 per regular or special meeting. Covered that. Number 4, candidates for mayor shall meet all requirements for a city council member set forth in section 3.02 hereof. So if you can't be a councilor, you can't be a mayor. Section 3.05, mayor pro tem election duties and term. The mayor pro tem shall be a council member elected by the full city council at the first regular meeting after each election of any council members or mayor. This term of the mayor pro tem is thus 1 year. The mayor pro tem shall act as mayor during the disability or absence of the mayor, and in this capacity shall have the right and responsibilities conferred upon the mayor. The mayor pro tem shall be entitled to vote as a council member. What that means is that for any reason, the mayor can't make it to a meeting, is disabled in some way, beforehand, the city council will have already voted, hey, this is going to be our not quite vice mayor, but vice mayor, our backup mayor, pro tem. That's good. We need to have that. The mayor pro tem shall be entitled to vote as city council. So it would be a city council member. So they retain their right to vote as a city council member. My only question is that specific, when it says that, is it talking about all the time or specifically when the mayor pro tem is acting as a mayor pro tem?
Oh, he's a city councilman. He's not the mayor. So in essence, it's not only to break a tie. The mayor does it only to break a tie.
Right.
So he would be a councilman. He would vote at all times, regardless of whether he's the.
Okay.
But as mayor pro tem,
He would still retain that voting
Yeah.
right,
because he's still
Right.
trying to be a council.
a councilman.
We have a mayor pro tem now, don't we? So there's no change in that.
I think 3 times I've seen the mayor pro tem do the meeting for the mayor. And I've been here for 13 years.
Pretty safe there.
Yeah,
Our mayors have been real good about being present.
they show up.
Election of mayor and council members. Mayor and council members shall be elected by plurality vote thereof. The candidates with the highest number of votes shall determine the winner. That's good.
Means it doesn't have to be majority.
So
You don't have to have 51%.
If they win by 1, they win.
Right.
Even if it's only 26% of the vote.
whatever votes are counted or the votes that's it.
As long as he has one or two votes more than the other
Right.
candidate.
One vote,
One vote. One vote is it. And it's
more than the next.
and it's all and that's it. It's not the quantity of votes within
50 plus one or whatever.
right.
But that's the way it is now too, isn't it, Bianca?
So
So no changes on that.
no changes there. Vacancies, forfeiture, and filing vacancies. The process for vacancies, forfeitures, and filing vacancies for mayor and council members are the office of the city the office of a council member or the mayor shall become vacant upon their death, resignation, forfeiture, or removal from office in any manner authorized by the law. This kind of alludes to a little bit of that. What if they find out that they were in some way a convict or something like that later on? Well, they'd get removed. If any member of the city council or the mayor ceases to possess the required qualifications for the office, or who is convicted of a felony or of a misdemeanor involving moral turpitude, there's that word, they shall automatically be deemed forfeit such office. Such forfeiture shall be declared by resolution and enforced by the council. If there is a declared vacancy in the office of mayor, the mayor pro tem shall assume the office until the next scheduled city election, which means that we could have just a mayor pro tem for up to the full term if this happens a week afterwards. So I'm curious. Special elections are a thing in the city, so I'm wondering if, in that sense, basically the city, if it would be the city's discretion that they would allow for a special election during that 2 years for a new mayor.
It talks about it later.
It does talk about it later. Fantastic. Perfect. So after a declared council vacancy, the remaining council members will appoint a qualified person to fill that vacancy for the remainder of that term. Any person appointed to a vacancy which occurs in the first year of a 2-year term shall stand for election at the next scheduled city election to serve out the remaining term of the office to which appointed. The city council shall determine the manner and means of appointment. So this is basically saying if a city councilor is no longer, they can appoint somebody that is otherwise either not a city councilor, but somebody that does fit the bill to become a city councilor. They can just appoint one, and then they'll come up with the vote, how it's going to go for the voting until then, after which. If a vacated position is that of a mayor pro tem, the city council shall elect a new mayor pro tem at the next regular meeting following the declared vacancy. Notwithstanding the requirement that a quorum of the city council consist of the majority of the members, if at any time the membership of the city council is reduced to less than a majority, the remaining members may, by majority action, appoint additional members to raise the membership to 3. These appointees shall serve the positions. These appointees shall serve. There messed the word there. These appointees shall serve until the positions can be filed or filled at the next general city election. All vacancies filled by election shall be for the remainder of the unexpired term or terms of the office so filled. So basically, if for some reason all of a sudden we only have 2 city councilors, then they can start appointing people to get up to their quorum requirements, and then get that going. It's just basically, this is just allowing for the government to be able to fix any severances.
Jacob, I think we may want to go back to number 3, paragraph 3, and just realize what that's going to do on the voting situation.
Mm-hmm.
If the mayor pro tem assumes the office of mayor, he's no longer a councilman. So he wouldn't be voting. He would be the mayor. That's the way I take it.
Okay. Well, I think that gets answered next. If in that case, then there would be a vacant seated council seat.
Yeah, but it says the remaining council members. So that concurs, solidifying the fact that that councilman is no longer a councilman. He's a mayor,
Mm-hmm.
so he doesn't get to vote except to break ties.
Except to break ties. So that kind of answers my earlier question then. Okay. Do we want to change that in any way, or are we? Everybody happy
Just
with
want
that?
you to understand it.
Thank you. Okay, on to powers of the city council. All powers and authority which are expressed or implied. Sorry, okay. All powers and authority which are expressed or implied to be conferred or possessed by the city council shall be vested in and exercised by the city council. Except where in conflict with and otherwise provided for within this charter, subject to the Constitution and laws of the United States and the state of Texas. The city council may establish ordinances, determine matters of policy, and otherwise exercise all municipal powers, functions, rights, privileges, and immunities that may be expedited for maintaining and promoting the good
Expedient.
sorry. Started trying to read too fast there. And promoting the good government, health, safety, and welfare of the city. I said expediting. Expedient. No individual member of the city council shall have any power to act, investigate, make appointments, or inquire into the conduct of any office, department, or agency of the city without the specific authorization of the city council in an official meeting. Meaning that city council can't just go start hitting at the water department people. They can't just start going and saying, hey, I don't think you're doing your job well enough, or I think you're stealing or anything like that, right? They can't just do that unless otherwise saying, hey, there's some kind of problem in this department. You're the guy to, we're gonna vote. You're the guy who gets to investigate this. Otherwise, that doesn't happen. And I don't know that we ever really do that now. Really and truly, I think that's
that could
more.
happen easily.
Yeah.
That could happen easily.
Oh yeah.
If somebody just wants to start investigating on his own, the councilman doesn't like the way things are going, he can start asking individual city employees questions about a certain person. And that's not his job
Right.
unless the entire council authorizes it.
Right. Now the city, that's kind of this, I think we'll get into that here in a bit, but if I read that correctly, the city manager, on the other hand, very well can.
That's his job.
That is his
That's
job.
his job.
That's what he's appointed to do. So,
But how about a city council, like they say, oh, well, it's public information, or we can go, they can't do that,
No,
right?
they're working for the city council. I mean, they could go to the city administrator and tell them, hey, you know what, and then the city administrator will. But it does happen.
But it does happen.
It does happen.
It does happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
so here we are. Number 3, without limitation of the foregoing and among the other powers that may be exercised by the city council, the following are hereby enumerated. I said that right? For greater certainty. Appoint and remove the city manager, city secretary, city treasurer, and city attorney. Appoint the municipal judge or judges. Review, revise, and adopt the budget of the city. Establish, consolidate, or abolish administrative departments. Advise and consent in the appointment of citizen advisory boards and commissions as defined and established by ordinance. Collectively and through the city manager, inquire into the conduct of any office, department, or agency of the city and make investigations. So collectively. So collectively, the city council could all as one say, hey, we want to start looking into this. And at which point the city administrator, that's how that would go.
But it does say through the city manager. It still doesn't allow them to personally walk through the city departments interrogating everybody.
Yeah,
It
that's what I
says
mean.
through the city manager.
That's
So,
what I mean, but it does happen,
yeah, but it shouldn't.
but it shouldn't. That's a clearance for me. Okay. Just wanted to clear that up.
But I don't think there's any liabilities for that councilman if he starts asking questions or investigating. I don't know what repercussions the city manager, mayor, whatever would have against that city councilman. You understand what I'm saying? And I don't know if there's anything
Well, he's going
that's
against,
delineated in the,
he's going against the rules.
It has to be the employee, say the employee is not liking that a certain council member is coming, then he could easily report him to like the ethics commission.
but,
There's
but
repercussions usually to go about them, but it can't come from the city administrator.
okay.
At which point, I suppose the ethics commission would, file, start some kind of investigation into what the city councilor has been doing and stuff like that, and then they'll come up with their own, I guess, repercussions. I don't know, and I'm sure we'll find this here in a while. Basically, if they could be recalled or lose their position because of it. I don't know that they can. And I don't know that it specifies in this that they can.
Like
That's
this,
something.
the duty of a city council, I just want to clear, is to like kind of oversee the city. If they have a question, they have to go through the proper channels. And, okay, I see this and that, you go to the proper channels, talk to the right people.
Right.
But you cannot go and say, oh, well, you do this and this and that,
Right. Yeah. And they can't just show up at an office or at a job site and start looking at
That's what I
people's
mean.
computers and
Okay.
stuff like that. Right. They can't do that. They're not supposed to do that. At which point, again, they could be reported to the ethics commission, and then, actions can be taken from there. Which is good, right? We want them to only be worrying about
What's good for the city.
what's good for the city, and then they
how to
tell
improve
the
it,
city
but not
administrator,
to-
this is the direction we need to go, and the city administrator goes to all the departments and says, here's how you're going to work that out.
Their responsibility as city councilmen is not to
Not
conduct the operation
The operation.
or the
right.
governance of the city per se. That's
I
the
just
city
wanted to-
manager's.
I knew that, but
responsibility.
I just want to clear.
Right.
Should be happening.
But it happens.
I know, that's what, but I
It-
wanted
it
to clear
happens,
that all of us were on the same page.
Yeah.
No, we
Okay,
agree.
because next time, say, nope.
Let's see here. Adopt and require. Okay, so yeah, like you said, through the city manager. Okay, so we're on to G. Adopt and require the maintenance of both the official map of the city and the official zoning map, which they do. Adopt and, as necessary, modify zoning, subdivisions, plats, development master plans, including the approval of variances and cooperation with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Fix and regulate rates and charges of all city utilities and public services, and then authorize the issuance of bonds by ordinance. All of which that's currently what the job is now. Section 3.09, prohibitions. We'll probably be stopping here before too long. I'm not going to make you listen to me for too much longer. Unless otherwise authorized within the charter or by law, no mayor or city or council member shall hold any other city office or city employment during their term as mayor or city council member. Kind of went over that a little bit earlier. In addition, no former mayor or council member shall hold any compensated appointed office of the city employment until 1 year after the expiration of the last term which they were elected and appointed. Now, this was changed specifically for this one. It used to be 5 years.
5 years.
It used to be 5 years, and they changed it on this charter to 1 year. You want to go over a little bit of what that was?
Do y'all understand the change that we're talking about here?
So,
Before,
Go ahead.
on subparagraph 1 on 3.09, the way it reads right now, the mayor or council members cannot work for the city as an employee for 5 years.
That's the current standard.
That's the rules in right now. But we're small towns, the way we were looking at it, and it's hard to find enough employees as it is. And somebody like a previous councilman would be a good choice because they're already very knowledgeable of city business and jobs. So we thought it would be good to be able to hire them after a year of serving. Give us a bigger job pool, employee pool. We didn't think it would be bad to do that. So, do y'all think it is a bad idea or want to leave it the way it is here?
Leave it the way it is here.
Okay.
Because we're not pushing anything.
So we'll leave that. All right. Neither the mayor, the council, nor any of its members shall in any manner direct the appointment, hiring, or removal from office of any employee whom the city manager or any of the city manager's subordinates are empowered to appoint, hire, or remove, other than the advice and consent function of the council for specified city positions. The city council at a meeting called for that purpose may express its views and fully and freely discuss with the city manager anything pertaining to appointment or removal of an employee. Basically, a city councilman can't walk into city hall and just fire somebody, just fire a desk lady for no reason at all. That's not, they can't do
It's
that.
not just not hire or fire himself, but he can't tell.
But they can't demand either. the city
That's right. They can't
manager.
demand that the city manager fire somebody. The city manager's got to have a
So
lot
you
of
kinda-
confidence and-
You kind of can't use your city position.
Right.
As a threat toward the employees or whatever.
Right.
yeah,
It's like us at school. I mean, we have channels to go to. You
yep.
just can't say, well, we don't like him or I don't do that. Get him out.
Right.
And you can't go to them.
Like I was saying, the city manager or superintendent or principal or, anybody in a position like that has to be a strong person though to fight back against pushback against a councilman telling you to fire somebody. When you know it's not right for that councilman to do that, you still have to stand your ground. And you'll find out here later that the city manager might get fired for not doing that. But, the councilman could take it up to the city council and say, I want to fire the city manager. So, he's got to be a strong person to be able to do the right thing.
It does go on to say the city council at a meeting called for that purpose may express its views and fully and freely discuss with the city manager anything pertaining to appointment or removal. They can say, I don't like him, but that doesn't mean
But
that they
that's as
can,
far.
yeah, that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah.
Now that's a little bit of a freedom of speech kind of nod right there, right? Like you can still say you don't like him, but you can't you can't try to pressure somebody to fire him. So that's all that is right there.
It's just a way to make your case that, hey, this person has done something wrong and shouldn't be working for the city. I mean, that's legal and proper,
But that's as far as you can take it there.
but you cannot force the city manager to fire him.
Number 3, except for the purpose of inquiries, and investigations as provided by this charter, the city council shall deal with city administrative officers and employees who are subject to the direction and supervision of the city manager solely through the city manager. Meaning, again, can't go in and just start talking to people about their position. Not if you're talking to them on the street or whatever, that's fine. That's not what this means. This means going specifically to an office or where that person works and talking to them as a city councilor. You can't do that. You have to do it through
chat.
Right. They're the manager. Neither the mayor nor the city council or any of its members shall give orders to any such officer or employee either publicly or privately, except as otherwise provided in this charter. Same thing. Can't go bossing people around. You're not the boss of them. Meetings of the city council. Regular scheduled city council meetings shall be held in accordance with state law and or at city hall or at such a place as a city council may designate. This isn't city hall. The city meets here all the time at these very tables in this building. They like it bigger, more space for people to meet than at the current city hall.
Jacob, I got 4 minutes.
You want to go ahead and
It's gonna be 7:30. So,
Go to bed.
we can actually go
Did I hear
ahead.
you make a
Is it your
motion?
bedtime?
I think you made a motion. I'm actually okay
That's
with
pretty
going ahead and
close to
stopping
almost.
there. I'm actually okay with stopping there. I'm tired of talking.
Well, we finished that section 309.
Okay. Well, we're done with 309. We're on to section 310 at this point, so we can go ahead and stop there at section 310.
Did you make a motion?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
I second it.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, sir.